Hi, I'm John Sangiovanni, Coordinator of Elementary Mathematics, and this is Math in Minutes. In this segment, we are going to explore comparing fractions. Let's take a look at 3/5 and 1/3. We can compare 3/5 and 1/3 by considering common denominators. In this case, the common denominators for 3/5 and 1/3 could be 15ths. When finding equivalent fractions with denominators of 15ths for these two fractions, we would find 9/15ths and 5/15ths. Now that we have common denominators, we can compare these fractions and decide that 9/15ths is greater than 5/15ths. One way that we can compare fractions is thinking about how they relate to benchmark fractions, such as 0, 1/2, or 1. We can use those relationships to then compare the fractions. We can think about how 3/5 and 1/3 relate to a half in this situation. We can see that this is what a half might look like. This would be 1/3, and this is what 3/5 might look like. We can easily see that 1/3 is less than a half, and that 3/5 is more than a half. Knowing that one is less than a half and that the other is greater than a half, we can then reason that 3/5 is greater than 1/3. We can use this reasoning about benchmarks to compare many different fractions. Let's look at some others. Let's consider 8/9 and 2/10. Again, we could find common denominators, but it's much more efficient just to think about how they relate to 1/2 or 1/2. In this case, 8/9 is much greater than a half. In fact, it's almost 1/2, whereas 2/10 is less than a half and almost 0. In that case, 8/9 is greater than 2/10. But what about 3/4 and 3/6? This reasoning should still work. And it does. 3/6 is equivalent to 1/2, as we know. 3/4 is a little bit more than a half. So in this case, 3/4 is greater than 3/6. Let's take a look at 4/13 and 10/19. As we know, we can compare these fractions by finding common denominators. But we also know that that's going to be quite a complicated process and probably cause a few tears. Instead, we can think about these two fractions and how they relate to the benchmarks of half and 1/2. 4/13 is, well, less than a half. 10/19 is a little bit more than a half. So we can reason that 10/19 is then greater than 4/13. This has been a look at comparing fractions using benchmarks. See you next time on Math in Minutes.